mystic attributes to the full did Dietrich Eckart propagate the idea of a leader, Führer, in the Thule Society and in the popular esoteric circles. Already in the First World War, the German military sent various expeditions, which later were known as German colonies. Some esoteric followers, like General Ludendorff, who had access to the foundations and connections to the secret orders and castles, supported the expeditions and their search for the lost cities and treasures of the old Atlantean high cultures. In the early 20s, in a privately financed expedition, Edmund Kiss explored various regions of South America and discovered a wide-ranging system of caves with an opening to the inner earth. The different esoteric societies with their secret orders, country estates, and later also their castles were the meeting points of the esoteric elite, which saw itself as guided to resurrect the old knowledge of Atlantis and of the Indo-Germanic prophecies. The society that dealt with the lost technology of the gods and their impelling force was the so-called Friel Society. This society collected all the information dealing with the technology of polarity and levitation. When the National Socialists came to power and the old leagues and alliances had accomplished their duty, the esoteric followers of the time began to carry out their expeditions at the state's cost. Various secret working circles financed by the Third Reich were established. The committee of the group, Heirs of the Ancestors, was concerned with the study of races, and some high esoteric followers were contracted to investigate the past of the Aryan race with ordinary archaeologists and scientists. Many Third Reich expeditions were initiated through the orders and foundations. Edmund Kiss went for the second time to South America with an elite group of scientists and the latest technology in order to find and enter into the inner earth and Agartha. Allegedly, they found a spaceship from Atlantis in one of the bigger caves. The secret society Akakor was founded, whose role it was to further explore the technology, even in the event of a war. In the 80s, was ARD television correspondent Karl Brugger killed because he had published a book which alleged an active role of this same society up to the present day?
I have the privilege of knowing Karl Brugger, the author of Volcanic von Akakor, many years ago in Brazil, where we worked together with the white Indian peoples of the upper Amazon, who spoke a dialogue very much like an ancient Germanic language and who had contact with the Star people. Tragically, Karl Brugger was killed by someone in the Brazilian establishment who felt he had too much information on the Indian civilizations and perhaps knew too much about the genocide against the Indian peoples taking place. I dedicated my book, The Sphinx on Mars, to Karl Brugger, and in this book I show for the first time the historic pictures that NASA has of the pyramid structures on Mars, as well as pictures of the pyramids in Brazil and South American places, suggesting that there was a historic connection between the planetary grid of energy places marked by pyramids and temples and those of other planetary bodies. Karl Brugger was one of the great historians, journalists, and humanists of the 20th century. It is very important for each of us to try to get in contact with his teaching, his legacy, because it forms the connecting link between the Indian peoples, the earlier Atlantean-type peoples, or what is called in Central America the Atlans, the great giants who were blonde, and the European peoples, to show a connecting bridge between civilizations and centuries. The chronic also refers to the coming of the extraterrestrial peoples, according to the Indians, at the beginning of the 21st century, due to the misuse of science, the destruction of the planetary environment, the imbalance of knowledge, what we call Western civilization, the Untergang des Auslands, will come to a quick change with the appearance of the star people. And for this reason, we must keep our eyes and ears open to the signs from space of a new communication system, connected also with the teachings of the Indian peoples.
The South American Indians of the Andes recognize UFOs as brothers from the sky who have always been there, who are there today. They are not any more unique than an airliner flying overhead with passengers aboard. To them, the brothers from the sky have always been there. They do make contact with the Indians, and they do treat people in remote areas where they cannot get to doctors. They heal them, they treat them medically, they interact with the Indians and with primitive people, both in the high plains and in the deep jungles. So when we began asking about these brothers from the sky, we discovered stories about such contacts everywhere. And in the course of one of these stories, we were introduced to an Indian from the upper Amazon. I think his name was Akunta, but I'm not sure at the present time, who offered to take us back into a civilization that he came from that was primarily based on a European culture that was transported there or transposed there sometime about the end of World War II. And they had taken scientists and scientific research underground in an area in the upper Amazon where they had succeeded in developing disc-shaped aerial vehicles that they could use to go all over the world with. The society was, this Indian called the society Akakor. He said that he had guided a German researcher by the name of Brugger, and I think his name was Martin Brugger, B-R-U-G-G-E-R, who was actually taken to the city and was afforded an opportunity to meet with some of the Europeans there. That Indian tribe in that area has many blue-eyed, blonde-haired Indians.
Damn, I'm beat.
And they appear to be descendants of a Germanic a group of people that were taken there sometime in the middle 1940s. And now they have produced children and they are young adults. And a society is flourishing there that is advanced over the contemporary societies around them by a substantial degree. We can take you back there. There is a man who lives in that area. His name is A.J. Gaviard, who will be willing to introduce us to either the Indian that guided Martin Brugger or other Indians from the same tribe who may be willing to take us back far enough to meet some of the members of that society. It's operated as a closed society. They do not come out down the river and enter Western civilizations. When they come out in their spacecraft and pick up what they need and take it back into the society, and they live in a closed environment, pretty much protected by the wilderness of the jungle itself. So it's possible to go back and further investigate the evidence of the existence of Akakor at any time. We can produce people who can do this. We can look at Mr. Brugger's evidence that he published, which was the result of his own research. But I personally am convinced that this society exists, that they have circular disc-shaped craft.
Because it contains a vaporized extract formulated from your urine. Compared to our first iteration, this EX grenade contains a higher concentration of your fluids, which should make it more effective against BTs. Whenever you avail yourself of your private room's facilities, we will collect the results and produce additional units for your use. So you needn't worry about running out.
Technologies, and they have human beings aboard who are quite different and quite advanced over the contemporary humanity of Earth today. These humans are interacting with the natives down there also, and there is substantial evidence that these extraterrestrial races are directly connected with the earlier civilizations of Tiwanaku, of the Olmecs, of a number of the other earlier civilizations in South America at a time before the last cataclysmic disturbances that changed all the society and reduced it to savagery once more.
A further expedition was sent to the South Pole, Expedition Schwabenland, in order to find the land with no ice and to explore the access to the inner Earth. Another expedition was sent to the Icelandic geysers, since there were insider stories about the access to the inner Earth. And another expedition was organized by Sven Hedin to the Taklamakan Desert in Tibet in order to find traces of the old culture of Urd.
What we call in the Buddhistic esoteric tradition as Shambhala is an actual area in the Taklamakan area of central China, next to the Gobi Desert. In 1988, with permission of the Chinese Academy of Science, I conducted research experiments in this area and confirmed with other engineers the existence of a vast underground complex of grottos, ancient structures and buildings. And in these structures we find statues of the avatars or beings later celebrated in Buddhism as the bodhisattvas, the beings that came from space, in the Vimana and the Tathagata. These are ancient Sanskrit terms for the vehicles of higher intelligence. In my opinion, Shambhala does exist as an underground structured civilization that is now being uncovered in Central Asia. And in this area of the Gobi, I believe we will find the origins of the Garden of Paradise, or the Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden as it is referred to in our book of Genesis. Ice. There are many layers of civilization, suggesting at one earlier point of time when the conditions of the South Pole were different. Clearly there was some type of civilization there. The evidences of huge dinosaur intelligence suggest that this was one of the possible places for the Garden of Eden. This, of course, is assuming that the shell of the Earth had a different north and south magnetic pole. And with the shifting of the pole, this region became suddenly very, very frigid. And thus we do not see any evidences on the surface of these so-called earlier conditions of intelligence. However, I believe with the further exploration of the documents that both Admiral Byrd brought to the attention of the world after World War II, and the Brazilian Navy uncovered in 1961 with its subpole expedition, that extraterrestrial intelligence is also operated out of the area of the South Pole. In that sense, the South Pole is a connecting point with other civilizations, possible extrasolar gardens of paradise.
What was it that Admiral Byrd found on the South Pole? Incredibly enough, in an official American Navy documentary film, we found footage of what Admiral Byrd found on the South Pole. He found giant freshwater, never freezing lakes with areas around them that were free of any snow. And in that film, we show footage of the Navy planes landing in these lakes. But even more so, he found, to his amazement, that his planes were disappearing very quickly. A lot of his planes were attacked by anti-gravity devices that were operated by the Germans there by anti-gravity saucers. A lot of them crashed into invisible barriers and disintegrated in mid-flight. This is an indication that the Germans had already perfected the force field shield, and they were up and operational around the German colony at Neuschwabenland. When he was retreating, basically the whole operation lasted for 1 week. They started at the end of February 47, and by the first week of March, they were through with the whole operation, and much earlier than scheduled, and they departed. And in an interview at Buenos Aires on his way back, Admiral Byrd made the incredible statement that the Third World War would probably be with an adversary coming from the polar regions of our planet, an adversary that has the ability to fly unobstructed from pole to pole. He was referring to the Germans at their South Polar colony at Neuschwabenland that were operating their anti-gravity craft with impunity and could fly circles around the globe, and of course would shoot out of the sky any of the attacking American planes.
The inner terrestrials surrounded the entrance gates with an electromagnetic protective dome, which no being or weapon can penetrate. After all this happened, it became the greatest secret of mankind. It started ufology as we know it today. Indeed, there is a second humanity, an inner terrestrial race who had already built cities in the inner earth before the sinking of Atlantis. These extra and inner terrestrial races built time gates and anchored these cities on a higher subatomic frequency. After the great purification, these time gates will fall, and at different places there will be once again access to the underground cities.
In 1961, the Brazilian Navy was conducting a series of experiments in the Antarctic. According to one of my colleagues who was in one of the naval ships, settling out of the ice packs, a large spacecraft emerges and takes off vertically at a terrific speed, shocking both the American and the Brazilian naval forces that were there. So it is clear that as late as 1961, we have official documentation from the Brazilian Navy that there is some other, emphasize other, underline this 3 or 4 times, life force or intelligence stationed at the South Pole, possibly to observe the scientific developments on the planet, possibly to observe the military operations and the forces of the East and the West in some type of Mexican standoff as the Cold War develops. We have clear documentation from other sources and other South American governments that some technology that is not human-based is there. That is to say, some type of higher evolutionary experience is there, and this is the next chapter of our quest. Why are they here? What do they want from us? And do they, namely the higher or alien intelligence, have some type of directing mechanism both for the U.S. as well as for the Soviets as to who goes into space and who conducts, as it were, the next evolutionary round of space development? These are key questions that we must resolve.
Also, gigantic cities of lights will descend out of their orbit to selected areas and will be anchored on the Earth. Right now, people who have reached a certain level of consciousness and are once again connected to the cosmic monad are drawn through their intuition to places chosen by the spiritual hierarchies in order to anchor the cities of light above these areas. These sites are absolutely secure. The Space Brothers and the spiritual hierarchies have created the so-called Islands of Light, where the Earth's frequency was increased so that all human beings and light workers can find each other on that level. Such areas are recognized by the fact that they attract an especially high number of people dealing with higher knowledge. These places have a higher grid anchorage. They are places of power, activated chakras, entrances to inner Earth, and a present UFO surveillance. The Space Brothers are going to pay special attention to these areas when the cataclysms begin, because that is where the seed for the new mankind will be found. That is where the first contacts will occur on a physical and telepathic level. Many small and large centers, shelters of peace, will be established by spiritual people who live together, who work on themselves and teach others. To the new mankind, these sites will be study centers and the new initiation centers for the Universal Brotherhood. These islands of light are recognized by the fact that they do not belong to a certain denomination or sect, but that they are open to every reality, and that they know that many roads lead home. The highest goal is to increasingly live our lives and love ourselves. This time there will be no arch, because man himself is the arch.
Again, as we raise the consciousness and we transform our body from a state of corporeality, which means this type of substance, you see, and as our atoms and as our molecules and as our energies speed up, the DNA system is totally transformed into a higher octave and a higher frequency, so that there is a whole new strain coming in as a result of this. When we're passing through, for instance, the photon belt, there will be no darkness. It's all light. Everything in the body, then, of importance will be etheric in nature, as opposed to corporeal or dense or density or whatever you see. Realities that we accept today will be no more. And so as a result of that, the DNA system and everything which constructs humanness will be changed, because we will now reach for a light body and will be of the light, as opposed to darkness and corporeality. So any change that's signified today scientifically or biologically and what have you in the DNA is because of this infusion of new consciousness and new light with the person coming in at this point in time. Many of us are, many people already are largely light, although they keep the body of corporeality to do what they have to do here on Earth, you see. Many people are already in the fourth dimension. Some are aware and some are not. But that's where we all have to go. And, of course, by 2011, as we pointed out, all of us have the option and the privilege, if we choose to do so, of being in the fifth dimension.
The photon belt is an intense field of photon radiation, light radiation, which, both according to several modern astronomers, astrologers, as well as Mayan tradition, emanates from the center of our galaxy, bisects the Pleiades star system and our star system at the same time. And the current period, we are moving in and out of this photon belt, spending several months in it every year. That the frequency that we spend in the photon belt is increasing by approximately 2 weeks every year. And according to the calculations of the Mayan calendar, around the year 2011, 2012 AD, we will be fully within the photon belt, and we will remain within the photon belt until around 4000 AD, according to the current calculations. And some of the work of both Jose Arguelles, other researchers, seems to suggest that the Mayans knew about this cycle, that every so often, many thousand years, we go in and out of the photon belt, that there seem to have been cultural as well as different climactic and earth changes that perhaps were sort of stimulated or affected by the entering and going out of that photon belt in the past history of the Earth.
We are changing both DNA and RNA in many of us. Many stones, many vehicles here are changing our chakra systems also. There are no longer 7 chakras in most of us. We are opening up new chakra systems. You'll see much more about this in the next 5 or 10 years also. You'll begin to activate many more of them, and also your DNA and your RNA will not be replicating in the same fashions. There are children who are being born who are conscious when they are born. And this will change also a lot.
The Dark Ages. During the rule of a dark age of separation, all knowledge that is passed on and all instructions are tainted. Every religion, for instance, is a sect, a separation from the real divine inner truth of life. Religion is something that happens in God's holiest temple. Man himself in the depth of his heart and in communication with his divine inner self. Throughout the Dark Age, countless fallen sun cosmologies who have dogmatic religious views reached the earth and became our religions. They represented the climax of separation from oneself. God's channels, prophets, and mediums received their messages from the God-created and separated dimensions. Most often, the pure messages were mixed with information from the astral worlds and their own ego. There are as many truths and religions as there are worlds and heavens of polarities and levels of development in the cosmos in their different dimensions. Every social structure which serves the power of the lobbies and the ego instead of mankind is a split, which in the end will restructure itself or crumble. All knowledge without love is a separation from being. Whilst the old program of the Dark Age runs out with the old light workers, the Illuminati, and their plans of a world dictatorship controlling the world of finance, it will disintegrate with the changes on Earth. The new incarnated light workers of the Galactic Confederation are already leading mankind into the new golden age. After the great transformation of mankind, the Space Brothers would like to welcome us as cosmic citizens into the Galactic Confederation of Free Planets.
Where do the Illuminati receive their knowledge? Well, I would use the famous jokes and stories about Tesla and Edison. According to Edison, invention was 95% perspiration and 5% inspiration. According to Tesla, the way Tesla was doing his invention, he would have 95% inspiration and over 5% perspiration. Tesla would get the vision. All he has to do is put the vision into paper. Then he has to take the paper to the engineers to put it into metal in the shop. A little fine-tuning here and there, and the device works. This is the usual mode through which information and know-how is channeled from the extraterrestrial and even higher levels of existence to our planet. The know-how is given, and we are left to put it into our crude terrestrial engineering and manufacturing methods. That's why the crude anti-gravity saucers of the 1880s, 1890s were made with rivets. Giant cannons were used to fire the first anti-gravity devices toward the moon. Later on, in the early 1900s, more advanced technologies were used, but always the technology would follow up with our terrestrial. Why are there two totally different scientific and engineering realities on the planet? Why the mass consumption engineering culture is 50 to 100 years behind the secret culture developed by the Illuminati? I have always had this very big question, very big puzzle in front of me. This is the Promethean dilemma for me. how come that with these incredibly good intentions to elevate the scientific and technological level of our civilization, we end up with the very negative and dismal results of all of these efforts? My feeling is that basically that is the major mode through which the, what they call it, the independent angelic presence on the planet is trying to corrupt the scientific and the political minds of the elite of our planet with visions of grandeur, with technologies that are too far ahead, possibly for our spiritual and moral development, and that are very dangerous, that can explode any minute and basically bring the end of our civilization, as has happened for dozens of times on our same planet. Again, information coming to us from many extraterrestrial revelations about previous illuminated efforts to speed up the evolution of the planet that ended up in very brutal, violent nuclear wars. The Illuminati have an agenda that would probably not be accepted in a normal, open voting system by the majority of the population on the planet. The creation of a new master race with hybridization, experiments done with animals. The first hybrids were done in German concentration camps 50 years ago, and there are people that have seen documentary films about living, walking, breeding hybrids between humans and animals. Creation of a new master race under illuminated guidance, and probably away from a package of genetic material that was introduced on the planet through an intervention by the Trinity.
The dark as well as the light power serves only one master, who is the creator of all that is, and whose goal is to create the superhuman. The final goal of human reincarnation is to create a human being who has experienced all imaginable positive and negative experiences, and therefore is able to develop beyond any judgment into the humanly incarnated image of God. A human being who has become God has lived through the completed range of the cosmic keyboard from the lowest to the highest note. God does not judge. He shines on his creations like a sun, on the flowers or the weeds, or on his being. The experiment of duality has come to an end, and the planet Earth is an ascending planet onto which the Creator himself incarnates in the shape of human beings. The return of the ascended brotherhood from Lemuria and Atlantis is the return of the 144,000 masters of light, the cosmic monads. They are incarnated as human beings, united, and together they will represent the white pyramid, God's eye, who sees everything, the presence of the Almighty on earth. They are the open witnesses who have all described from a different perspective the process of ascension, since they have already lived through it before.
Greetings, player. Welcome to the Earth Matrix Game 21st Century Edition. This is your orientation. Begin Part 1. Your soul will be placed in a heart and a body. You will be trapped in a cage called the Reed Cage. You will be further contained within trillions of tiny prison cells. We will start your heart and your gameplay in the Earth Matrix will begin. The goal of this game is to find and pass through the exit. The exit is located at the North Pole. It is a stardate, a wormhole that returns you to paradise and eternal life. Your memory will be wiped before entering the game. You will not know the goal of the game. It is up to you to awaken and discover the goal. The goal of this game is to find and pass through the exit. The exit is located at the North Pole. The goal of this game is to find and pass through the exit. The exit is located at the North Pole. Begin Part 2. You will only retain glimpses of your divine nature and intent. You will forget who you really are. Your dream opponents will present you in every possible way from awakening and evidence. They will hate you, control you and enslave you. They will use you to attain profit, status and power for themselves. The truth will be shown to you everywhere, but in riddles and symbols. You must awaken to see them and decode them. There will be epic distractions and deception preventing you from seeing the truth. You will experience duality, scarcity, need for money, drink, fighting, jealousy, sadness, etc. If you do not wake up and exit, you will die and recycle over and over back into your body. Your memory will be wiped before starting each new life. This cycle will continue until you awaken and exit. You must be true of heart to exit. Blood is the spiritual currency of this matrix, and you must learn how it relates to exiting. You have grown a great deal on your journey to awakening. Player, please prepare for your initial memory wipe and insertion into the Earth Matrix. Good luck, player. The goal of this game is to find and pass through the exit. The exit is located at the North Pole. The goal of this game is to find and pass through the exit. The exit is located at the North Pole.
At first glance, there's nothing particularly remarkable about this scene. These are objects that you might find at any typical campsite. However, there is a connection between them that goes beyond their obvious function. Most of these items, as well as those that fill our everyday lives, are made, at least in part, of minerals, the natural materials of which the Earth is composed. Geologists define minerals as solid substances that are naturally occurring and inorganic. Minerals also have a definite chemical composition in which the atoms are arranged in an orderly pattern called a crystalline structure. Thousands of different chemical compositions and crystalline structures occur in nature, and combinations of these result in thousands of different mineral varieties. If we were to take away the objects from this campsite around me that require minerals in their manufacture, there'd be very little left to look at or sit on. Human society depends on the products that it invents and manufactures, and minerals are an important raw material. The minerals we use in the manufacture of consumer goods, and that are a part of virtually any man-made object you can name, are also found here, in the rocks that make up the Earth's crust.
In this open-pit mine, for example, iron ore is extracted from the earth. It is smelted and combined with other mineral products to form steel, which is molded to make automobiles, ships, and skyscrapers. From these sand dunes, quartz grains are separated, then melted and molded to form glass, which is used to fill the windows of the world. Rocks are simply aggregates of mineral grains. Many granitic rocks, for example, contain mostly orthoclase, quartz, and plagioclase, while basalt typically contains plagioclase, pyroxene, and olivine. And so, apart from their value as components of everyday objects, minerals are also useful tools for classifying rocks. The minerals contained in rocks provide hidden clues about the conditions under which the rocks formed.
A mineral is like a little fossil. It's a historian of a past time. Fossils to us tell us about past living conditions of where that fossil grew and lived at a very different age. And minerals do the same thing. Like fossils, minerals in a given rock are millions, if not billions of years old. but they have within themselves, within their own internal compositions, their own history. Different geologists use minerals in different ways. A geochronologist uses minerals to determine the age of a rock, whether it be in millions or billions of years, using the radioactive elements that are in each mineral. The sedimentary petrologist and stratigrapher use minerals in a sediment to determine how that sediment was formed into a sedimentary rock. And some of those minerals in a sediment tell that geologist about mountains that were once there eroded to form a sedimentary rock. The igneous petrologist and the metamorphic petrologist use minerals to determine the pressure and temperature recorded during a rock's crystallization from a molten magma or deformation during metamorphism. In plate tectonics, the structural geologist uses minerals as well. Many minerals record magnetic directions, and as the plates have migrated, the magnetic directions are shifted. And so minerals have recorded plate motion. So we have learned a lot about where the plates once were relative to today from the minerals. Different geologists have learned different things, but the minerals have recorded that information despite their great antiquity of age.
Over 2,000 varieties of minerals on Earth have been identified. And new ones are still being discovered. But most are rare, including some that have only been found at a single location on the planet. In fact, the common types of minerals number only about 200. Examples include quartz, olivine, orthoclase, and plagioclase. These common mineral varieties are called rock-forming minerals because they comprise most of the rocks on Earth and also serve as the basis for classifying them. Of course, before a rock can be classified, its minerals must be identified. This is one of the most fundamental tasks in all of geology. The differences between mineral varieties are related to their atomic structure. The atoms that make up a mineral are perfectly and symmetrically arranged in an almost infinite three-dimensional crystal latticework. This structure is held together by a variety of chemical bonds. Individual atoms often occur as electrically charged particles called ions. One important bond is formed when these ions combine to neutralize their charges. This results in the more stable configuration of a crystal structure. A somewhat analogous situation might be the relationship between loose cinder blocks and a cinder block wall that has been carefully constructed and mortared together. Both are composed of the same raw material, but the wall is strong and stable because of the way the individual blocks are mortared together. On an atomic level, each type of mineral has its own unique crystal framework based on an orderly arrangement of bonded atoms. Crystal growth occurs atom by atom, layer by layer, in exactly the same pattern, repeated over and over again. This regular internal structure has a great deal to do with the shape and physical properties of the resulting mineral. As it turns out, a mineral's physical properties are usually quite different from those of the elements that compose it. A good example is halite. Halite is a mineral that forms when sodium and chlorine atoms join during the evaporation of a lake. By themselves, each of these elements is extremely dangerous, sodium being an explosive metal, and chlorine a poisonous gas. Yet when they are joined together, sodium and chlorine combine to form something most of us use all the time, ordinary table salt. Another mineral with physical properties that are different from those of its chemical components is quartz.
And if you look at that mineral quartz, it's composed of silicon, which in its pure state is a silvery solid substance, and oxygen, which isn't a solid at all, but an important atmospheric gas that also behaves flammably. Silicon and oxygen are very different individually. They don't combine to form quartz under ordinary surface conditions, but inside the Earth, quartz-forming reactions are common. Quartz is harder than steel due to the three-dimensional bonding of its individual silicon and oxygen ions. It's usually transparent, forms beautiful crystals, very different from its pure, separated elements.
With a few simple tools, a steel knife, hydrochloric acid, a rock hammer, geologists in the field can perform tests to identify minerals.
Beginning scan. Scanning bridges ID. Verifying ID.
Each mineral has a distinctive set of physical properties based on its own unique combination of chemical composition and crystalline structure. Physical properties include the color of the mineral, the way it reflects light, the way in which the mineral breaks, and some simple chemical reactions. These are used to help identify the mineral. It's easy to see that this rock is made of different minerals because there are 4 different colors of mineral crystals. Color is a fundamental physical property of minerals. Look at this silver mineral called muscovite. It looks almost like a stack of paper with the individual sheets flaking apart quite easily. The tendency of minerals to break along flat planes is called cleavage. And cleavage is a property that's determined by the crystalline structure of the mineral. This pink mineral is feldspar. Unlike muscovite, it has cleavage, but there are 2 directions of cleavage at about 90 degrees to one another. The hardness of minerals is another identifying characteristic. Quartz is quite hard. It can't even be scratched by this steel hammer. Calcite looks similar to quartz, but is much softer and scratches easily. Like cleavage, hardness is a physical property that's determined by the crystalline structure of the mineral, and is a good way of differentiating between these 2 minerals. Another physical property of calcite is that it dissolves in dilute acid. Calcite is a carbonate mineral, and the acid releases the carbon as carbon dioxide gas. Quartz is a silicate mineral. It doesn't dissolve in acid, and so there's no obvious chemical reaction. The way in which minerals reflect light is the physical property called luster. Feldspar has a dull luster. It doesn't shine at all. But compare that to muscovite, which has a glassy luster. Metallic minerals, like galena, reflect light like a polished metal surface. Pyrite also has a metallic luster, but is a different color than galena. One useful way to distinguish between some metallic minerals is a physical property called streak. When we rub a mineral against a porcelain plate, we powder the mineral. And by comparing the color of the mineral in its powdered form to the coarse crystalline form, we can distinguish some types of minerals. Hematite is reddish-brown in its powdered form and gray metallic in its coarse crystalline form. Compare this to galena, which is gray both in the powdered form and the coarse crystalline form. Geologists in the field use simple tests like these to help identify minerals in rocks. But this is only the first step. Some minerals are only present as microscopic crystals in rocks, others in only extremely small quantities. And some minerals can't be identified by physical properties alone. Petrologists, the geologists that study the composition and origin of different types of rocks, need to know much more about a rock sample like this and the minerals it contains. Once the sample is collected and identified in the field, it's taken back to the laboratory for a much more thorough analysis of the minerals.
Petrologist Lawford Anderson is analyzing a piece of granite from the Whipple Mountains, which lie along the Colorado River in southeastern California. The purpose of the investigation is to determine the age of the granite, as well as to figure out exactly where in the Earth's crust it originated.
That rock comes back to the laboratory, and if we're going to learn to read that part of Earth history, we've got to open that rock up like opening up a book and start to read what kind of secrets are pent up in its mineralogic or elemental composition. One of the first things happened is that we saw that rock. And from that slab of rock that's removed, we have a piece of the rock here. And from the slab, we break it down to a smaller piece. If we're going to learn to read that part of Earth history, we've got to open that rock up like opening up a book and start to read what kind of secrets are pent up in its mineralogic or elemental composition. One of the first things happened is that we saw that rock. And from that slab of rock that's removed, we have a piece of the rock here. And from the slab, we break it down to a smaller piece from which a very thin slice is made. That is a layer of rock that is sliced so thin that we can pass light through it in a microscope to look down and see how the different minerals are arranged, be they sedimentary, igneous, or metamorphic minerals. The nature of the way they're intergrown, their composition, tells us about the conditions of that rock's history, that part of Earth history.
In addition to microscope work, Anderson also uses X-ray analysis to provide important information about the composition of minerals and rocks.
We had that low one last week. Has that been corrected?
To prepare the sample for analysis, the rock is literally broken down. This is done by first crushing it into smaller and smaller pieces. Ultimately, the rock is pulverized to the consistency of a powder. The powder is carefully measured out. Then melted and pressed into the shape of a disc. Finally, the disc is subjected to X-ray bombardment that yields the precise composition of the rock, element by element. Another important analysis involves shooting beams of electrons at thin sections of rock to determine the individual mineral compositions within the rock. The data derived from these procedures is vital. It enables Anderson and his colleagues to ascertain the pressure and depth at which the granite formed.
What we found out about the rocks from the Whipple Mountains is that they originated from the middle crust of the Earth. Some 25 or perhaps even more than 30 kilometers down, those minerals were crystallizing from a magma that was in place at that level, deep in the Earth's crust, at their age of 89 million years. So today, where we've brought the rocks back, they're at the surface now, but they were once deep, and they record in their composition and in their mineralogy how the middle crust originates.
The conditions under which a mineral is created may be clearly reflected in its atomic structure, and therefore in its physical properties. Diamonds and graphite are perfect illustrations of the relationship between a mineral's environment of formation, crystal structure, and physical characteristics. Diamonds have long been coveted as perhaps the most beautiful and precious of all gems. Graphite, which is used in pencils, is extremely commonplace and far less valuable. Yet both minerals are made of the same substance, pure carbon. The great contrast between their physical properties can be attributed to the differing structural arrangements of their carbon atoms.
Diamond is the hardest of all minerals. Why is it so hard? It's because it has a very special, unique covalent bond that holds the different carbon atoms so tightly that they cannot be scratched. In contrast, graphite, also a carbon mineral, is held, the same carbon atoms are held with a very different kind of bond. And it's a very soft bond, and that mineral becomes soft, and that's why we can use graphite in pencils. So hardness is one aspect. It's directly related to the bonding that holds the structure together.
The covalent bond gives a strongly interlocking atomic arrangement to the carbon atoms in the diamond. The weak bonds of carbon and graphite, however, develop a layered crystal structure.
Graphite is formed under low-pressure conditions near surface, while diamond is formed under tremendously high pressures. In fact, needs great depths in the earth to form, depths that are well within the mantle.
It is these depths and pressures that give a diamond its covalent bonding and dazzling beauty, and make it the rare and sought-after jewel it has been throughout history. Another rare mineral with a long and illustrious past is gold. Few other minerals have ever had its economic or political power. Yet unlike copper and silver, which have various industrial uses, gold has only limited practical value. The considerable value that gold does possess is based on its historical function as a kind of universal currency in a world where countries have little faith in each other's paper money. The power of gold is exemplified by the settlement of California. Until the middle of the 19th century, this was a wild, uncharted, sparsely populated region. Then came the discovery of gold at Sutter's Mill, and practically overnight, thousands of people from all walks of life pulled up stakes and converged on the area, hoping to strike it rich. The same kind of frenzied activity was then repeated at the end of the 19th century. Following a gold strike on the Klondike, 30,000 adventurers poured into what is now the Yukon Territory. Gold and other pure minerals are relatively uncommon. What makes them so rare is that unusual conditions are required for them to concentrate within the Earth's crust.
Metallic minerals, such as gold and silver and copper, all form the same way. They're precipitated from very hot water solutions called hydrothermal solutions that percolate up through cracks, up through fissures in the earth, and as they reach cooler regions, they begin to crystallize. And whatever metals and non-metals that are dissolved in that hot water, precipitate out. In case of gold or silver or copper, it calls for very special waters, and that's why they're all very rare.
These waters are generally derived directly from crystallizing magma or from hot groundwater circulating through the rock overlying an igneous intrusion. Rocks containing economically viable concentrations of metallic minerals are called ore deposits, and hydrothermal ore deposits are among the more important sources of metal known.
Most of the elements that make up ores don't have a home in everyday minerals, don't fit into the structures of quartz, or feldspar, or mica. And as a lava or a magma begins to crystallize the common minerals, the elements are bunched up together, concentrated, being dislodged away from the growing crystals. Water is also building, and at some late stage in the crystallization of almost all magmas, water begins to boil off. And as it boils and rises out of the magma system, it takes with it all those elements that didn't have a home. And these go off and fill up fractures up through the rocks above the magma chamber. And as they reach the cooler rocks, they begin to precipitate.
Crystallization and precipitation from a hot solution is only one of several ways that minerals commonly form. A number of minerals crystallize directly from water. This occurs under certain conditions that favor chemical reactions between elements already present in the water. A common mineral that forms this way is hematite, sometimes called bloodstone by jewelers. Hematite usually forms in well-oxygenated water where dissolved iron and oxygen react and precipitate around sand grains, eventually forming red sandstone. Evaporation of sea or lake water triggers precipitation of an important group of minerals called evaporites. Halite is an example. Other minerals precipitate directly from gases through a process known as sublimation.
The sublimation process usually happens when you have a very hot volcanic gas, like a sulfur dioxide, which can come out literally by tons per minute in a large volcanic eruption. When these gases start to cool, they'll go directly from the gaseous vapor state to individual crystals of sulfur and build a yellow mass around the volcanic vents.
Minerals also form by biologic processes, as when an oyster makes a pearl. In addition, sponges and corals make their shells out of calcium carbonate taken from seawater and precipitated as the minerals calcite or aragonite. As we've seen, minerals can form in many ways. Most are relatively uncommon, while a few dozen are quite plentiful. But no minerals on the planet are more abundant than the silicates. Silicates constitute more than 90% of all mineral varieties on planet Earth. Most silicates possess neither the political and financial power of gold nor the exquisite beauty of diamonds. But their economic value as construction material is enormous. And one of their common ingredients, the element silicon, is used extensively in a very specialized type of modern technology: computers. Pure solid silicon is crystalline and hard, so it can be sliced to a thickness of only a fraction of a centimeter. It's also a semiconductor, which means it can be made to conduct electricity. These properties make silicon the ideal raw material for the manufacture of microchips used in computers. These days, computer technology is so widespread that we tend to take it for granted. But without the thin silicon wafers made from common silicate minerals, the awesome processing power of the computer age might never have come about.
Minerals have played a fundamental role in the political, economic, and technological evolution of human civilization. Wars have been fought and empires created over the geographic distribution of precious metals, of gems, and industrial minerals. And today, mineral resources are more important than ever before. The primary concern of the petrologist, however, is purely scientific. Ultimately, the lure of studying minerals for these geologic detectives is to unravel the geologic history, not only of rocks, but of the Earth itself.
Annenberg Media. For information about this and other Annenberg Media programs, call 1-800. Annenberg Media.
The Greeks believed that the fumes from volcanoes were the fiery breath of a monster imprisoned by Zeus beneath a mountain. The Romans were convinced that such eruptions were the work of Vulcan, blacksmith to the gods, busy at his personal forge. During the Middle Ages, volcanoes were feared as passageways to hell, a sulfurous inferno for the damned. Our modern spacecraft have revealed that if volcanoes are hell, then there is not only hell on Earth, it exists in many other parts of the solar system. In 1988, the Voyager space probe startled scientists when it showed Jupiter's moon, Io, belching volcanic sulfur hundreds of kilometers above the surface. Numerous volcanoes have also been observed on the planet Venus, as well as on Mars, where the largest volcano, Olympus Mons, is 3 times the height of Mount Everest and 600 kilometers across. Volcanic gases have contributed to the atmospheres of these other worlds, just as they have provided the air we breathe on Earth, produced water for streams and oceans, and helped create conditions suitable for life. They also serve as clues about what is going on inside our planet.
Volcanoes are proof that the interior of the Earth is very hot. Hot enough, in fact, to melt rock. This molten rock, called magma, is less dense than the surrounding unmelted rock. It rises buoyantly, just as currents of hot air rise from the surface of the Earth. Where the magma reaches the Earth's surface, volcanoes erupt. Different unmelted proof that the interior of the Earth is very hot. Hot enough, in fact, to melt rock. This molten rock, called magma, is less dense than the surrounding unmelted rock. It rises buoyantly, just as currents of hot air rise from the surface of the Earth. Where the magma reaches the Earth's surface, volcanoes erupt. Different types of volcanoes can erupt in very different ways. In some eruptions, magma pours out onto the surface of the Earth in rivers of molten rock called lava flows. In others, high gas pressures underground cause the volcano to erupt explosively. The magma is sprayed into the air as a cloud of very small hot particles called volcanic ash. This fine rock powder can remain aloft in the atmosphere for days and travel thousands of kilometers before finally settling to the surface of the Earth.
Still good.
Sometimes, volcanic ash can remain suspended in the atmosphere for months, blocking out sunlight and affecting global weather. Volcanoes not only erupt in different ways, but they're also found in a wide variety of geologic environments. There are about 500 known active volcanoes on dry land. But most volcanic activity occurs in places hidden from view. There are probably several thousand active volcanoes on the floor of the open ocean. And most of these lie astride mid-ocean ridges, where Earth is forming new crust.
Most undersea volcanoes lie along divergent plate boundaries. Here, runny basaltic lava, as hot as 1200 degrees centigrade, pours quietly through fissures, much of it cooling in the dark water to form flows of bulbous rock called pillow lava. Other oceanic volcanoes, such as those of the Hawaiian chain, do not lie on divergent plate boundaries.
The Hawaiian volcanic chain occurs in the middle of the Pacific plate, far removed from any plate boundary. And the best hypothesis that has been invoked so far to explain that is called the Hawaiian hotspot hypothesis. And what that entails is a hotspot, a zone of melting deep in the mantle, over which the Pacific plate rides to the northwest as part of the plate motions. And that this heat source then, or hotspot, actually locally melts the overriding solid rock to form the basaltic magmas, which then erupt. Then as the plate continues to move, the volcano that had formed and is transported to the northwest and ultimately gets severed from the feeding magma source and becomes extinct. However, then over the same place, a new volcano starts to form as more magma is melting and a new island forms. So that the chain of Hawaiian Islands actually show an age progression going from the southeast, which is now currently over the hot spot, going to the northwest.
Like volcanoes at divergent boundaries, oceanic hotspot volcanoes erupt predominantly very hot basaltic lava. Flow after flow piles up, building vast, broad mountains known as shield volcanoes.
In general, the volcanoes that are formed by very low viscosity magmas tend to be very broad, convex, very broad shield-like volcanoes that in fact are called shield volcanoes. And the reason for that is when the lava is erupted, because it is so fluid, it can spread out over long distances on very low slopes. So as a consequence, you get lava flows traveling for 10, 20, 30 kilometers.
Many people think of a volcano as erupting only from a crater in its summit. But in fact, this is not true of most volcanoes. On a Hawaiian shield volcano, lava can issue not only from summit vents, but from the flanks through long systems of fissures known as rift zones. Gravitational stresses acting on the side of the shield, together with the pressure from intruding magma, cause rift zones to form. This rift zone on Kilauea volcano is over 50 kilometers long. Some volcanoes at sea, together with the great majority of volcanoes on dry land, lie along convergent plate boundaries, such as those that encircle the Pacific Ocean. Volcanoes in convergent plate settings tend to erupt more explosively than those at hotspots and along divergent boundaries. They are called composite volcanoes because they are made of alternating layers of lava flows and explosively erupted fragments. All volcanoes erupt gas, which contributes to volcanic explosiveness. The most common substances in volcanic gas, water vapor, carbon dioxide, sulfur, and nitrogen, are also found in the air and in the oceans. Evidence of volcanic gas can even be found locked within hardened lava.
This black volcanic rock is basalt. It's the principal type of lava found in shield volcanoes. Like other types of volcanic rock, basalt forms when lava cools and crystallizes following a volcanic eruption. When an eruption occurs, there's a sudden drop in pressure, which causes bubbles of gas to spontaneously form in the lava. This same process occurs when we open a bottle of soda. These holes in the basalt were created by gas bubbles that formed in the lava when it erupted.
Along with the impact of gas content, the explosiveness of an eruption is also influenced by the temperature and chemical composition of its magma. Magma, rich in silica, is typically cooler and more viscous than magma with a lower silica content. This results in eruptions that are extremely explosive.
Why is the eruption of a composite volcano so violent and explosive? The answer lies in the andesitic lavas of which these volcanoes are composed. Andesite contains more silica than basalt does, so it crystallizes at a lower temperature, creating a more viscous lava. Crystals will often form in an andesite magma before an eruption, thickening it even further. High viscosity traps gases dissolved within the magma and prevents them from escaping easily. During the initial stages of the eruption, gas bubbles cannot break through the thick lava until pressures within them reach explosive proportions. We know what pent-up gas pressure is. The blast of the eruption sprays fine droplets of lava into the air, forming clouds of volcanic gas. And the escaping gas whips some of the lava into a foam called pumice.
Pumice is a special type of volcanic rock formed from the eruption of viscous, highly gaseous magma. It has a frothy consistency and is so full of air pockets that it can float in water. Viscosity not only influences the explosiveness of an eruption, but the character of its lava as well. The Hawaiians have a word for each of the two main types of lava surface that are influenced by viscosity. Runny lava, which contains dissolved gases, forms a smooth, billowy surface called pahoehoe, literally ropey. Degassed lava is stiffer, tearing apart its crust through its own forward motion. This forms a rough, jagged surface the Hawaiians call a'a, which translated means a painful surface for walking. Active pahoehoe flows develop lava tubes. As the lava slowly cools along its margins, it seals itself in a narrow channel, which may crust over. Insulated in a tube, the molten lava loses little heat. This allows it to travel further than it could otherwise, which is one reason shield volcanoes are so broad and gently sloping. More explosive volcanoes build steep cones because the lava is stiffer and cannot spread as far, and because explosive debris simply piles up around the central vent. Some volcanic cones are made up entirely of fragments. Cinder cones are a good example.
Cinder cones, like the one behind me, are very different from deposit volcanoes or shield volcanoes. They're small and the flanks of the cones are quite steep. A cinder cone is composed of fragments of volcanic rock called cinder. Like volcanic ash, cinders are droplets of lava formed during an explosive eruption. The drops that form cinders, however, are much larger than that, indicating that the explosion was much less powerful than that of a deposit.
Volcanoes are, for the most part, associated with convergent and divergent plate boundaries, or well-established hotspots. But there are some intriguing exceptions.
Yeah, I think so.
Volcanic activity has occasionally occurred far from these settings, such as here in the desert of southeastern California.
We're 700 kilometers from the nearest convergent plate boundary where subduction-related volcano activity is occurring, and 200 or 300 kilometers from the nearest divergent plate boundary. And yet here we sit near the top of a young cinder cone, a volcano that has been active probably within the past few thousand years, far from a plate boundary.
Well, that's certainly right, Rick. Most of the volcanoes of the world are along the plate boundaries, but throughout the world there are lots of places where the crust is being stretched by tensional forces and fractures are opening up. I think this still reflects plate tectonics in some sense because the crust is being thinned, being pulled apart, and under that tension, the crust actually fractures. And if you have that situation, the pressure is relieved on the system, so the magma then can rise up. So wherever in this region you have localized magma due to whatever heat sources that might exist, the magma will come through and erupt and form the cinder cone.
Belts of volcanoes have grown, shifted, and died with changes in plate boundaries. The history of individual volcanoes themselves can be quite complex.
A volcano can look very different at different stages in its development. Here at Panem Crater, for example, the initial eruptions were gas-charged explosions. They produced this shallow crater surrounded by the rim of pumice that I'm standing on. Having lost most of its gases, the remaining magma rose slowly out of the vent in the next eruption. This magma plugged the vent by forming this dome, composed of volcanic glass. This glass, known as obsidian, is the product of an extremely viscous magma and is composed almost entirely of silica.
Volcanic domes usually form in the aftermath of powerful explosions at composite cones, such as at Mount St. Helens in 1980. A decade after this eruption, the new dome continued to grow inside the volcano's crater. One of the greatest hazards associated with explosive volcanism is dense clouds of hot ash which roar down volcanic slopes into low-lying areas, sometimes at well over 100 kilometers per hour. It is currently estimated that volcanoes pose a potential threat to more than 500 million people across the globe. In an effort to lessen the damage from volcanoes, geologists are refining their methods of forecasting eruptions.
Probably all volcanic eruptions are preceded by and accompanied by measurable changes in the physical or chemical state of the volcano. And one of the principal means of monitoring or measuring the changes, at least the physical configuration of the volcano, is by means of what we call ground deformation studies. And this simply is just a term for measuring the changes in the shape of the volcano. Most volcanoes will swell up or inflate prior to an eruption, and this causes the volcano in itself, the surface of the volcano, to be uplifted and the sides tilted out and bulged outward. The other major component in tracking a volcano or monitoring a volcano is the seismic monitoring of earthquakes that occur beneath the ground, because as the molten rock forces its way up toward the surface to erupt, it has to make room for itself. It's got to fracture the rock to move up higher or laterally.
In recent years, scientists have been increasingly successful in forecasting major volcanic eruptions. Despite these advances, there is still much to be learned about volcanoes. Many volcanoes have distinctive behavior. Often, eruptions are too dangerous to observe at close range, and some of the most important eruptions of our time have burst forth in remote regions far from the view of geologists. On the afternoon of June 1st, 1912, one such eruption began in the vicinity of Mount Katmai, a volcano in the Alaska Range. The sky turned ominously black as an immense cloud of ash, pumice, and gas billowed up from the volcano. Volcanic activity continued relentlessly for 3 days. Despite several attempts to reach the site of the eruption, it wasn't until 1916, 4 years later, that a National Geographic expedition led by Robert Fisk Griggs reached the scene. As the explorers first entered the valley near Katmai, they were startled to see what appeared to be thousands of small steaming volcanoes. In fact, these were not volcanoes at all, but gaseous steam vents known as fumaroles. Before the eruption, the valley had consisted of swamps and moist woodlands. When the thick layer of hot ash blanketed the ground, moisture boiled away as steam. Griggs dubbed this simmering landscape the Valley of 10,000 Smokes. The expedition discovered that the summit of Mount Katmai had collapsed, forming a vast crater or caldera, but there was no evidence the eruption had originated here. Instead, magma seemed to have moved out from underneath the summit to escape elsewhere. Unsupported, the mountaintop fell in. The actual eruption
So you here to usher us into a new chiral age or some shit?
Yeah. That cool?
Hell yeah, go for it. Been waiting forever and a day for this. you get that? That little guy. Same as mine. Where the hell did you get it?
Yeah, I can't really say. But the little guy, he came with the pod, if you gotta know.
And who'd you get the pod from?
Igor, from Corpse Disposal.
My little brother. So, what? He just gave one of these to you. Why?
I was there with him, at the end. We were moving a body. Things went to shit. There's BTs everywhere. And one of them grabbed him. So he told me to take it and run.
That right. So what's your story? You lived through a catastrophe like that, only to keep on doing the same work? Okay. Been a long time coming, I suppose. You take good care of that little guy. He belongs with the expedition. With you.
All right.
Better if you take this with you too, I reckon. Can't think of anyone who could use it more.
The name's Higgs, the particle of God that permeates all existence. Ah, so it was you that dragged him into all this. Bloodied but unbowed. What's that? Bridget Strand is dead. America's last president dead and burned. Oh, and now the girl's been chosen to take Mommy's place. Well, that won't wash. She's not cut out for politics, is she? Oh, but don't worry. I'll find her. And I'll keep her real safe. You see, I've come to understand the truth of the Death Stranding. Oh, there's so much you people don't know. The girl, for instance. She's not like you or me. Dooms ain't her thing. And she's more into destruction on a worldwide scale. An extinction entity. Oh, it's so hard to form connections when you can't shake hands. Fortunately, I've got a good connection to the other side. Now you're no bridge. To me, I'm bound to all of it. This world, that world, and our sweet little angel of death. You're on the menu. All it'll take is one itty-bitty void out to blow us all to kingdom come. So how about it? Aren't you getting tired of the grind? Isn't this what you've been waiting for this whole time? A game over.
Heads up, Sam. According to our data... Heads up, Sam. According to our damage assessments, it would only take a single void out to total Port Knot City. A single BT allowed to make contact with a civilian would be enough. We can't let that happen. You've got to deal with that BT right now.
Lay at the base of the mountain, where a dome of lava had oozed up near the center of the source vent. The expedition named this dome Nova Rupta. Today, the dome has cooled, and most of the fumaroles are cold and inactive. But Katmai is still of enormous interest to geologists, who must withstand difficult physical conditions as they carry on their research.
Field work is rather challenging to begin with because it involves a certain amount of planning and physical stamina. This is particularly challenging because it's so remote. We're really on our own here. The weather is so fierce. And things like, there are other aspects such as things like protection of the environment, because this is a park and wilderness, have to be foremost. It takes very careful planning and a stout heart during long, windy, and rainy spells. It also gives you a humble feeling about the people who came before, who had no impact before, not even radio. Where just getting to the coast here was a major, very long challenge, let alone the problems are serious, and with lack of attention, even life-threatening.
Geologic insights from the study of Katmai make the effort worthwhile. The 1912 eruption was unique. It was a single, well-documented volcanic event that took place in a rather simple geologic setting. And the source vent is well preserved because the large-scale collapse that normally accompanies eruptions of this size occurred elsewhere at Katmai's summit. The research currently underway has several goals. Geologists hope to chart the underground structure of the vent and uncover clues to the explosive process. They would further like to understand how heat escapes from the eruption deposit. In order to do this, indirect techniques are needed to survey the area because important evidence is buried too deep to examine directly. The clever ways these surveys are designed illustrate how scientists have risen to the challenge of studying volcanoes. For example, geophysicists measure the resistance of the rocks to electrical currents. For example, geophysicists measure the resistance of the rocks to electrical currents shot into the ground. The more easily electricity flows, the more likely the ground is to contain water, because water is an excellent electrical conductor.
This site has a lot of clay at it, Don.
Measuring electrical conductivity not only provides a clue to the water content of subterranean deposits, it also helps the scientists study how the deposits are formed, because water is the important agent of volcanoes.
Okay, I'll see how this looks. Break out of that. That looks good, Don.
Since some rocks are more magnetic than others, geophysicists also map variations in magnetism to help study the subterranean structure of the vent area.
Every rock has some magnetic signature or some magnetic field associated with it that was locked into it at the time of its cooling, when it cooled below a certain temperature. And what we do with the proton precession magnetometer is we measure the intensity of everything about you, the magnetic field at that particular point. And then with another instrument, which is sitting in one place and recording the variations of the Earth's magnetic field, the diurnal variations, the daily variations, we subtract the two, and we are left with a component which we hope is just the rocks themselves.
Magnetic surveying reveals that the area near Nova Rupta is more magnetic than the surrounding terrain. The research team believes this results from a concentration of iron-rich minerals within and beneath the dome. The vent enclosing Nova Rupta is largely filled with low-density ash and pumice, which exerts a weaker pull of gravity than the surrounding rock. So yet another geophysical property, variations in gravity, may be used to trace the underlying pattern of the rocks.
Well, in a simplified manner, there's a mass on the spring inside her, and the mass of the spring is extended by the weight of the mass, and that mass will actually be pulled down by the mass underneath the Earth. And so the greater the mass of the Earth, the more the spring will be extended, and basically a mutual extension of the spring. Very precise manner.
Geologists at Katmai would also like to learn more about the relationship of ore deposits to volcanic activity, for in the fumarolic gases of the Valley of 10,000 Smokes, metallic ore minerals have found. Since the eruption in 1912, streams have cut deep channels into the ash deposits, exposing many of the fumaroles in cross-section. This allows geologists to examine the structure and mineral deposits beneath the fumaroles, ordinarily hidden from view. Especially intriguing are mineral deposits sublimated from the hot volcanic vapors. Although much data have already been collected, the Katmai project is still in its preliminary stages. Research may continue here for years, bringing with it, no doubt, surprising new discoveries that will have implications far beyond this region.
Some of this work will have application elsewhere. In terms of understanding explosive volcanism, understanding the processes certainly should allow us in the future to be better at predicting eruptive events and understanding what the consequences of eruptive events are likely to be. People living around volcanoes, as many people in the western U.S. do, and many other areas of the world, that's a serious problem. Understanding how metals get transported in igneous systems may help us to better exploit ore deposits. And understanding how heat escapes from magma and how hydrothermal systems develop may help in the future in exploration and use of geothermal energy. In some parts of the world is important and useful.
Many people think of volcanoes only as a geologic hazard that destroy lives and buildings. But there are beneficial aspects to volcanoes as well. Volcanic rocks decompose very rapidly and form soils that are rich in the nutrients used by plants. In fact, soils derived from volcanic rocks are among the most fertile in the world. Ironically, it's this connection with agriculture that induces about 10% of the world's population to live in the shadow of active volcanoes. Hot springs, like this one, are very common in volcanic areas. In many parts of the world, this volcanic heat is collected and used to generate electricity or directly heat buildings. The capital of Iceland, a city of over 100,000 people, is heated almost exclusively using geothermal energy. The benefits of volcanoes extend beyond our homes and agriculture, even beyond human history. Oceanic volcanism recreates the Earth's ocean basins about once every 120 million years. And volcanism early in Earth's history is thought to have produced most of the water in our oceans and atmosphere. So volcanoes attract the attention of geologists for many reasons.
Incredible.
For their power to destroy,
For the first
and their
time
economic
in history,
benefits.
a human being has defeated a BT. Were you not a repatriate, I doubt it would have been possible. Not only does contact with your fluids pose no risk of triggering a void out, but in much the same way as your car is rejected by the beach, your blood can be used to expel BTs from our world and return them to the other side. You've given us hope, Sam. Perhaps we may yet be saved.
Be proud, my friend. Emily's still waiting for you in the west. Head to your boat. It's ready. Get those supplies to Lake Knot City. We're just getting started.
And ultimately for their critical role in the evolution of volcanoes.
Gonna catch a ride on that boat, Sam? Before you do, be aware that you'll have to leave behind any cargo you haven't gotten around to delivering. It'd be a shame to abandon something important, though, especially if you were close to finishing a run. My advice, put that stuff in your private locker in Port Knot City. Or, if you're feeling responsible, you could just delay your boat trip until you've tied up loose ends. It's your call.
Yeah, like that.
Snack?
You came through then.
I don't break that easy. Name notwithstanding.
You saw that asshole too, right?
Higgs. He's the leader of a separatist group.
Seemed to me like he was controlling that BT.
That's level 7 for you. Higher, maybe.
Seems like you know a lot about him.
Used to work together. Guess you could say we had a contract.
You did business with terrorists? Whoever pays, huh?
He wasn't like that back then.
So what's your angle? You want to save the world, or you want to fuck it all up like him?
I just wish things were different, all right? Here's all right. Don't worry, she still floats. Come on, we're the only cargo left.